Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, as you all know by now, I love sharing real human stories behind successful tech careers and emerging technologies. But today, I want to learn more about what happened when the worlds of technology and finance collided for Adam Grealish at Altruist. And also learn more about why financial advisors armed with the right tech tools have never been more important. But I don't want to reveal any spoilers, so buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to California, where Adam is waiting to speak with us now. A massive warm welcome to the show, Adam. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure, Neil. Thanks so much for having me. So I'm the head of investments at Altruist. For those not familiar, Altruist is a technology company for financial advisors. We're building a modern end-to-end platform for advisors to run their business, from investing, account opening and funding, through performance and accounting. Basically, everything an advisor needs to run their practice and help their end clients, their end investors have a delightful experience with their money. Kind of to tell you a little bit about myself, I guess, and how I got here. It's been kind of interesting, perhaps. My career is I've always kind of hit that nexus point between technology and finance. I've spent my entire career in finance, but it's always been at this point where technology was really transforming how we were doing our jobs. So my first job right out of school, I was a floor trader on the Chicago Board Options Exchange. So the colorful coat and open outcry thing that's entirely an anachronism at this point. But that was my first job. And really, while I was there, the floor trading business was going through this massive transformation of electronics. In fact, by the time I left, we were doing more of our trading and more of our volume electronically, even though we were physically standing on the floor. So somewhat interesting. And from there, I spent some time doing asset management in New York, investing globally in stocks across all regions of the world, and also then moved to Goldman Sachs, where I was trading corporate credit. So basically bonds for U.S. companies. And again, same sort of transformation. When I started, all of the trading, or the majority of the trading, was happening open outcry or through phone or chat. And by the time I left, all of the trading on the most traded instruments was being done electronically. So again, this trend that's followed my career. I joined Betterment, which was the first robo-advisor in the United States. So really putting that electronic, digital-first focus into retail investing. And then most recently joined Altruist, where we're, again, building this very modern tech platform for advisors.
Wow, that's incredibly cool, especially with that being your first job role as well. So were you one of the lucky guys that knew what you wanted to do as soon as you left school?
I was actually conflicted in a lot of ways. While I was in school, I was a research assistant for an economist, and I really enjoyed that. It was really neat. In fact, like in some ways it might be, you might consider it like my origin story for how I got into tech and coding in some ways, is that I was a research assistant for this economist. We were basically taking large sets of census data and trying to understand how people's schooling choices impacted how they did for the rest of their lives in terms of employment, what their wages looked like, how likely they were to be employed, and so on. And so to do this, we had these massive sets of data. We were using code to kind of work through the data and estimate various things to understand what was going on in the future. And this was kind of my first real brush with using code to apply it towards a problem that we're trying to solve. And it was, fascinating to me. It was fascinating, the insights that you could get out of this data that had hundreds of thousands or millions of lines of information in it. And from there, I just, really enjoyed it. And so there was this kind of split coming out of school that I want to continue to pursue economics, or I also had a fascination with the financial markets at the same time. And it again was kind of a problem with lots of data, and the prospect of using technology and code and systematic ways of thinking about the problem really captivated me as well. So that was the fork in the road, so to speak, and I've been enjoying it ever since.
And as you said, that it was that path that led you to Altruist, and that's where the worlds of technology and finance all collided for you. But for people listening and hearing about it for the first time, can you tell me a little bit more about the problems that Altruist is solving and what makes it different from other tech solutions out there?
Yeah, sure. First, it's probably useful to just contextualize the problem that Altruist is stepping in to solve. And it really starts with historically the financial advising ecosystem was underserved by technology stacks in a lot of ways. They had to basically cobble together, and this is true to this day, advisors have to kind of cobble together their own stack from individual point solutions that exist for billing, financial planning, investment management, and hoping that all these pieces work together well. Secondarily, from a practice management standpoint, this becomes very challenging because each is priced individually, which means that the bill to build this stack ends up being fairly substantial. The end result of this is that it becomes somewhat fairly expensive to run a practice as an advisor, which then means that financial advice ends up being limited to those folks that have enough money to clear high minimums, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to gain access to an advisor just because of the cost structure and the way it exists. And we've seen solutions kind of come in to solve this. Certainly, we've seen a lot of innovation in the retail space to try to service this underserved piece of the market. But meanwhile, kind of the incumbents in the industry have been slow to move and focus here. So it's created this air gap, so to speak, for advisors, where the retail space is being addressed pretty aggressively with tech solutions, but the stack that advisors are generally relying on has not innovated at the same pace. And this is where Altruist is looking to step in. We're building a vertically integrated end-to-end solution for advisors to run their practice, everything they need in one place. So all those essential tools and workflows to run that practice, I mentioned before, account opening in a digital fashion, which to most people probably doesn't sound that interesting in a world where we're used to ordering a package online and it's showing up the same day in some cases. But digital paper account opening is something that is still more or less the norm in a lot of ways, and waiting days, if not weeks, in order to move money, get going with starting your financial relationship with an advisor. Altruist is cutting that down to literally minutes through an all digital solution. So, I mean, one thing I like to point out is Altruist is the most modern tech stack for advisors, almost definitionally. The company is less than 3 years old, came out of beta about a year ago. So the first lines of code were not written more than 3 years ago. So, just the modern experience, modern practices, the way that you would expect a technology solution to exist is exactly what we've built, and it feels really nice to use in a lot of ways. So it's really helping advisors, whether it's an emerging advisor who's growing their practice to advisor who's breaking away from a larger institution to go out on their own, to we're also helping larger sized firms streamline and revamp their operations. So that's really the focus of what we're doing and the problem that we're addressing.
And I'm also conscious we'll have people listening from all over the world, some very familiar with fintech and the financial industry, and some just on the outside of that. So just to further set the scene, can you tell me a little bit more about the state of financial advising and wealth management, and maybe a little on what is a registered independent financial advisor and how they can help consumers, and why consumers should care about the role that tech is going to play in transforming this space?
Yeah, no, that's great. And like one thing before digging into too much of the details, just to again set the scene, is there's an analogy I like to use. And I think that this is often lost on many folks who are looking to invest and to find a financial advisors, is this break between financial advisors and brokers. And a financial advisor is someone who ultimately has a fiduciary responsibility, which means they're putting their interests second to yours as the end investor. Whereas suitability is slightly different. They do not have that same obligation. So you can think about a fiduciary as doctors have a fiduciary duty. And a good analogy I like to think about is a butcher versus a nutritionist. So brokers who have a suitability standard, they're in a way a butcher. They'll sell you the best piece of meat. If you go into their shop, they'll sell you the best piece of meat that you could ask for. They know everything about which cut, which is going to be best for how you're planning on barbecuing, so on and so forth. But they're not asking the broader question of like, should you be eating this piece of meat? How's your cholesterol looking? Would you like some veggies to come along with it? A nutritionist is closer to a fiduciary, where they're looking at the whole picture and they're asking themselves what's going to be best for them. And I think that's an important thing to think about. So kind of moving in one click in on this, Altruist is very focused on helping financial advisors build and grow their practice. From a mission perspective, we're very focused on helping give more people access to great financial advice. And that really starts with advisors who are fiduciaries. So what does that look like? We use this term RIA, or registered investment advisor. So the RIAs, registered investment advisors, they have a fiduciary obligation. These are the nutritionists, so to speak. And we think about this group, it's in the US, it's 40,000 firms. In fact, many are breaking away from the broker-dealer model, where they're captive to one firm and they may be acting on a suitability standard and maybe looking to deepen that relationship as a fiduciary. So that's one theme that we've absolutely been seeing, is more firms looking to go out on their own, not be captive to a larger firm, and really represent their clients' best interests. So that's something that's really exciting for us. We're standing there ready to help those advisors grow. Another theme that we've seen just in the industry overall is, in order for a financial advisor to run their practice, they need someone called a custodian, which kind of operates in the background perhaps to the end investor in some ways, but ultimately they're holding the securities on the behalf of the investor. They're keeping records of all those things, of all the trading records, who owns what, and helping facilitate trading. Well, we've seen a lot of consolidation within this space. And with consolidation, it means that there's less options for advisors when they're trying to choose who this kind of foundational piece of their business will be built upon. So Altruist offers custodial services. This is really exciting for us to be a new voice in that piece of the conversation with advisors. And then we're also seeing the blurring of the lines between technology and custody. So we're seeing traditional custodians looking to build more tech solutions, and we're seeing more tech-focused companies like ourselves looking to build modern, very advisor-focused custodial solutions. And then finally, what I'd say is, we've got a growing generation of financial advisors who are looking to have a very differentiated experience with their end client. So one where the clients are demanding very different things from them. They again, to go back to this idea, we're used to having a great digital experience when we're ordering food or when we're ordering a package. And most of the time, that is not the case when you're interacting with a financial advisor. So leveling up the end client experience so that it feels digitally native, mobile native when you're interacting with your financial advisor for literally one of the most important things of your life, your financial life and your financial goals, is on par with when you're ordering some new shoes online or something like that.
And I'm glad you mentioned financial goals there, because we are at that time of the year where everyone's planning out their goals for the year ahead. There's this window of opportunity where we're all feeling optimistic and trying to identify what trends are going to dominate the year ahead. So through your work, you have actually a unique pulse on the trends and issues shaping the wealth management and financial advising technology space. So I've got to ask, are there any particular trends that excite you at the moment?
Yeah. So one we've seen gaining momentum at an accelerating pace that I'm personally really excited about is the growth of socially responsible investing. Now, it goes by many names: impact investing, socially responsible investing, ESG investing, which stands for environmental, social, and governance, which are three of the pillars that are often used to evaluate the social impact of a company. This is a trend that it's nothing new. It's the first ESG fund was launched in the 70s, but has really picked up pace in the past 3 years. In fact, assets moving into this area have been doubling or more every year for the past 2 or 3 years. And it really speaks to a number of other trends that we're seeing in the space overall. One is demographic. We're seeing younger generations, think like the millennial generation, are now in or approaching the peak earning years of their lives. So we're starting to meaningfully accumulate wealth. Meanwhile, the older generations are spending down money in retirement, or we're seeing transfers of wealth as older generations are transferring wealth to younger generations and so on. So, and with these generations, both younger and older generations care about these social issues and so on. But we've seen empirically, both in surveys and how younger generations are deploying their money, that there's a higher focus on socially responsible investing in the younger generation compared to the old. So it's really neat to see this trend emerging. We're seeing all sorts of new products and ways to express these views, basically helping investors invest more along with their values, which is, to me, very exciting. I'd say a second trend that in some ways follows right off the back of that is technology enabling massive personalization of one's investments. So one specific example of that is investing along one's values through an ESG framework or other socially responsible impact framework. But just more generally, being able to personalize your investments, to personalize them towards your specific investing timelines, to say, I want to hold more or less of this. I want to be broadly diversified, but I do want to tilt more or less towards this theme or this individual security. And one thing that's really unlocking this is a technology or product called direct indexing, which is when you, instead of, I would say like 10 years ago or so, 20 years ago, the last 10 or 20 years has been this you could describe as this rise of index fund investing, being able to very cheaply and efficiently gain access to entire countries or world economies, and being broadly diversified at the swipe of a couple of buttons, so to speak, and at a very low cost. Direct indexing is something that's following naturally on the back of that, which is being able to hold these same indices that these ETFs are holding, but actually holding the individual underlying securities yourself in your own name as opposed to through a fund. And that unlocks all sorts of great things. One, personalization. You can then say, hey, I want to hold the S&P 500, but I want to steer clear Amazon or Facebook or whatever it might be. Or I want to hold the S&P 500, but I also want to upweight anything that is investing in green technologies or so on. And there's a second angle to that as well, which is because you're holding these yourself, not only can you personalize them, but it also confers some really interesting tax benefits as well, where you're able to sell securities at a loss and hold on to that loss to net against any gains and buy similar securities at the same time. So this is called tax loss harvesting, and it's something that direct indexing allows you to do at a higher scale. And honestly, like, it's something that, very wealthy clients and individuals have been doing for years and years. And now technology is at the point where this is on the precipice of being offered more broadly to the everyday investor like you or I. So I'd say that's another trend that's super exciting that I've certainly have my eyes on.
And another trend I've seen is with low interest rates all over the world now, many, in particular younger users, are seeking alternative investments in everything from crypto, NFTs, to even wine and sneakers, of all things. But I'm curious, how do you see tech-savvy investors changing that in traditional investment landscape? And where do you see advisors playing a role in that new world too?
Yeah, no, it's a great call out and great observation. We've absolutely seen technology making more things available, brand new asset classes, like you said, wine, art, crypto, even sneakers. And it's really neat to see all of this technology making things that were once not accessible to more folks. Now, I think that it only makes the role of a financial advisor that much more important, because it creates a new problem now that that I can invest in literally anything, what should I be investing in? And that's the question that advisors can step in and help an individual investor sort out. And particularly advisors who are acting in a client's best interest and also have been doing this for years and years, they can kind of take a step back as the objective third party in the room. It's really exciting to be thinking about investing in whatever it might be, NFTs, sneakers, art, wine, amongst other traditional assets. And having someone who's kind of been around the block and can help put this in a framework of helping an investor make it march towards their financial goals and hitting those financial targets to continue to be broadly diversified, to manage the volatility of assets and find the right ways to mix them together. This is the role that financial advisors play. And I think their role only becomes more important as new asset classes and new investment types open up. So it's a really neat time to be an investor, just because there are so many options and so many things that one can invest in. I've compared it in the past to, and forgive my perhaps dorky analogy here, but there's a time in the ecological history of the world called the Cambrian explosion, which was this time archaeologists were digging and they came to this layer in the fossil record where there were just all sorts of different organisms. There's just there that they'd never seen before, and just an explosion of different organisms with eyes on their tails and 8 legs and wings and fins all together. Just nature was trying a whole bunch of things to see what might work. And it almost feels like we're in a similar time here. We're seeing an explosion of different things you can invest in, vehicles and so on. Some are going to ultimately drive the evolution of investing forward. Some are probably going to be left to the wayside, like the organism that has some eyes on its feet or whatever it might be. So I feel like we're in a similar time now from an investing standpoint, what we have access to as an individual investor. And the advisor, I think, plays an important role in helping navigate that world.
And a few moments ago, we were talking about the big goals of investors out there, but what about yourselves at Altruist? Is there anything you can share about what's next for you and what your big focus is going to be this year?
Yeah, really, I think one thing that really defines Altruist is our connection to the advisor community. We are unusually aligned with the advisor community for a lot of the other providers in the space. I mean, starting with our founder and CEO, Jason Wink, who is an advisor himself before building this company, literally is building a company to solve the problems that he experienced as an advisor. And advisors will talk about this sometimes as well. Some of their partners to help them run their business, they'll be watching golf on a Sunday and see an ad from that same company targeting their clients to come and use their advisory services. So that type of thing really doesn't exist at Altruist, and it creates this real unique relationship between ourselves, our client, our advisor, our customers, and what we're building for them. So we're constantly listening to their feedback and looking to improve their experiences and how they can customize and run their practice better. Specifically, super excited about being able to build tools to help advisors make better, more informed decisions about how they're investing their clients' money and how they're helping drive them towards their financial goals. So ultimately, that looks like giving advisors more high quality choices on how they can invest and generally how they run their practice, and ultimately delivering on a great client experience, both from a user experience perspective and, ultimately, really importantly, from helping those clients achieve their financial goals.
Excellent. Well, I wish you the best of luck for this year and beyond, and we'll stay in touch, of course, and maybe get you on for an update later in the year. But we've now come full circle now, because we started talking about your origin story. I'm now going to have a bit of fun with you and ask you, what was the soundtrack to your journey in tech and the world of finance, or a song that maybe just helps you get your head in the zone before going into a big meeting or going on stage? It could be money or mo money, mo problems. I don't know which angle you're going to take here, but what is your song and story?
No, it's a great question. I love it. So I'm a big fan of electronic music, and I've spent a lot of my career coding as well. And I think if you talk to a lot of coders, they're always find the soundtrack that just puts them in the zone to listen to. I think probably a lot of coders would also say it's something that tends to be a little more electronic. So I would lean that way to answer that question, and specifically to call out a specific album that is often a go-to for me. It's a classic for when I'm coding. The artist is Fuse, which is ultimately, it's Richie Hawtin is the artist, but he made this album under the name Fuse in 1993, and the album is called Dimension Intrusion, and it's an absolutely outstanding album, and just it sounds great today, approaching 30 years old. So I'd say that, and I've coded to it for years. Just listening to it, just talking about it even reminds me of a time when I was in my New York apartment building a computer, and that was on in the background. So I think that's what I would point to.
Wow, love that. What a great choice and a great story. And for anyone listening that are new to the artist, what would be the standout track from that album that we'll put on our playlist, would you say?
Oh, okay. The first one on the album is really great. I think it's called New Day. You might have to check me on it. But the first one on the album is just absolutely great. So
awesome. Well, I'll get that to the Spotify playlist. And for anyone listening, want to find out more information about Altruist, maybe contact your team or find out more information on anything we talked about today, what's the best starting point?
Yeah, great. Yeah, you can check us out at altruist.com, on Twitter at Altruist, also on LinkedIn, or shoot us an email at hello@altruist.com. And we'd love to chat with you.
Well, I've loved chatting with you today. So many great points there. And like we were talking about, there are a lot of new asset classes now, from NFTs and crypto to wine, etc. And that makes the role of the financial advisor even more important. And that, combined with your unique pulse on all the trends and issues shaping the wealth management and financial planning technology space, it's been absolutely amazing to get some of those insights out of your head and share them with people all over the world. So thank you for sharing that with me today.
Yeah, Neil, thanks so much. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
So a big thank you to Adam for sharing his insights on the trends and issues shaping wealth management and financial planning technology and all the spaces that surround that. But as for everyone listening, I'm curious, what alternative investments have caught your attention? Is it wine, watches, sneakers, horses, whatever it is? I'd love to hear your stories. Obviously, I'm not a financial advisor, so the only advice I can offer is avoid fast women, slow horses, and never leave the bookies with a smile on your face. But other than that, I'd love to hear your views on investments in 2022 and beyond, and the problems we're solving with technology. So a big thank you for listening as always. Remember, email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, and my website is techblogwriter.co.uk. So I'll see you all again bright and early tomorrow, but thanks for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.